Dante562. What's going on, guys? For those of you guys who follow my videos, you know that whenever I do a Manny Pacquiao video, I almost always make a comparison to Oscar De La Hoya. Why is that? Because you guys would actually be surprised with how much Oscar De La Hoya and Manny Pacquiao have in common. They have a lot of similarities. We can first start with the star power. Just like Manny Pacquiao, Oscar De La Hoya, he was the most loved, he was the most popular, he was the biggest thing in the sport. Instead of God's favorite, Oscar De La Hoya was HBO's favorite, just like Manny Pacquiao, right? They could both do no wrong, right? But let's go further than that. Let's look at the beginning of their careers. Just like Oscar De La Hoya, Manny Pacquiao was extremely dominant in the smaller weight divisions, right? Very dominant in those divisions. Same thing with Oscar De La Hoya. Just like Oscar, when Manny Pacquiao moved up to the welterweight division, this is when he started to struggle. Oscar De La Hoya was destroying people in the lighter divisions. It looked like he was unbeatable, right? Soon as Oscar moved up to the welterweight division, that's when he started to fight the more intelligent fighters, the slicksters, the American style fighters, the sweet science type fighters, right? And this is when Oscar De La Hoya struggled with every single major opponent that he fought against. Even his victories were very close split decision victories, right? You take Ike Corte. A lot of people think Ike Corte won that fight, right? And Oscar De La Hoya wanted no rematch. You take the Pernell Whitaker fight. As biased as Larry Merchant is, even Larry said right after he interviewed Oscar, I thought Pernell Whitaker won the fight, And then he goes on to lose to Felix Trinidad. He loses to Shane Mosley, so on and so forth, right? Well, I guess it wouldn't surprise you that Manny Pacquiao too only really struggled when he moved up to the welterweight division. He struggled against an older Shane Mosley that Floyd Mayweather beat easy. Well, I won't say he struggled against Shane Mosley. Let's just say Shane Mosley's foot movement and defense exposed Pacquiao further than he was already exposed prior. He didn't look too good against Joshua Clottey. He didn't look good at all as far as I'm concerned against Bradley. The only clear-cut victory he really has, and he got hit pretty often in that fight too, was the Miguel Cotto fight. But unfortunately, I got to rain on his parade on that fight too, because Cotto had just came fresh off of a knockout loss, right? And now let's make the comparison of the controversy. Just like Manny Pacquiao against Tim Bradley, which the majority of the world, they think that fight was a robbery, and Manny Pacquiao, the hero, he should have won that fight. Same thing happened with Oscar De La Hoya against Trinidad, right? Same exact thing. Oscar De La Hoya Oscar is in the biggest fight, welterweight showdown, right? He loses the fight. He gives up the championship rounds, and everybody screams robbery. Doesn't that story sound very, very strikingly similar to Pacquiao versus Bradley? Pacquiao gives up all of the championship rounds, and everyone screams out robbery, right? Someone, I asked this question in one of my Pacquiao videos that I did when I was talking about Bob Arum and, Pacquiao still being indecisive. I asked you guys, I said, I basically said, never in the history of the sport has someone been quote unquote robbed, right? And the person who so-called robbed them, he's actually offering them a rematch and they turned it down. I said never has that happened before, right? Only one exception. And it was one of you guys on YouTube who did remind me. And you were absolutely right. It is one person who did it. That turned down a rematch when the person who so-called robbed them offered them their belt back. Guess who it was? It was Oscar De La Hoya, right? Oscar De La Hoya did the exact same thing. Everybody screaming out robbery, robbery, robbery. Oscar De La Hoya was the one who didn't want that rematch, right? He was the one who didn't want that rematch. What else do they have in common, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. Well, just like when Oscar De La Hoya had lost to Trinidad, right? And the whole world was focused on Oscar versus Trinidad 2. That was the big, big fight. But because negotiations fell apart, sounds similar, doesn't it? Because negotiations fell apart, Oscar De La Hoya decided to fight a smaller, undefeated American champion that no one knew about, that everyone thought that Oscar was just going to run over. Who was that? It was Shane Mosley, right? Oscar De La Hoya thinking this guy is smaller. I'm more focused on the big super bout with maybe possibly a Trinidad rematch down the road. He went in there thinking that Mosley was going to be a stepping stone, and Mosley ended up beating him. Why does that sound so similar? Because that's exactly what happened with Manny Pacquiao. While Manny Pacquiao was focused on eventually fighting Floyd Mayweather, he couldn't, get the negotiations to go right. So Bob Arum put him in there with a smaller, undefeated American champion, Tim Bradley. And what was supposed to be smooth selling, on a course, on a path straight to Floyd Mayweather, turned out to be disaster and a loss. And just like when Oscar De La Hoya lost to Shane Mosley, Oscar didn't want that rematch. Only reason Oscar fought Mosley years down the road was because Mosley had got destroyed, or he got beat twice by Vernon Forrest. That's when Oscar finally said, okay, you know what? I think I'll go ahead and fight him. Right? Same thing, right? Same thing with Manny Pacquiao. He loses to Tim Bradley, and guess what? He really doesn't want the fight. Right? He really doesn't want the fight. Oscar De La Hoya didn't want to fight Fernando Vargas. He ducked Fernando Vargas forever. He kept saying, I would never, this was his exact quote. Oscar would always say, I'm not going to let that guy make money off of me. He's insulting me, talking this and talking that. I would never let him make money off of me. Guys, I remember this shit like it was yesterday. I remember watching Trinidad fighting Fernando Vargas. I was out at my uncle's house in San Jose, California. We all around the house tripping, jumping up and down, when all of a sudden we see Trinidad knock Fernando Vargas the fuck out. And I remember like it was yesterday while everybody was screaming. Soon as he knocked him out, I told everybody in the room, I said, watch guys, I guarantee you Oscar calls out Fernando Vargas now. Right after he got knocked out, right? I bullshit you guys not. It wasn't even a week later. Oscar was saying, oh, I'll fight Fernando now. Yeah, I'll fight him. Oh, yeah, right, Oscar. All of a sudden, he can make money off of you now, right? Please, man. Same thing happened with Shane Mosley. Shane Mosley, I'm talking about Shane Mosley and Manny Pacquiao, right? Shane Mosley came all the way up to Freddie Roach's gym in Hollywood, and he talked to Freddie Roach directly. He said, "Come on, man, I want to make this fight." Right after Mosley knocked out Margarito, right? His biggest victory in his career. And he was like, "Come on, Roach." He talked to Roach. He talked to Pacquiao. He said, "I want to make this fight." Freddie Roach, they said Freddie Roach told him straight up that, "Nah, you too tough. You too tough, Mosley." Of course, he ain't going to admit that now, but that's what Freddie said. And they turned it down. Pacquiao and Freddie Roach, they turned it down. Just like the Oscar De La Hoya Fernando Vargas situation, soon as Shane Mosley loses to Floyd Mayweather, "Oh, you know what? On second hand, I think we'll go ahead and fight you, Shane Mosley." Very, very similar. Very similar situations, right? And last but not least, since they failed so much in their recent years as a welterweight, I'm talking about Oscar and Manny, both of their careers was riding on them fighting against Floyd Mayweather. If Oscar De La Hoya beat Floyd Mayweather, he could have made up for so many failures in his career, right? So many high expectations that fell flat on the damn ground, right? Same thing is going on with Manny Pacquiao. His career is going to be defined on how he does against Floyd Mayweather. And if he loses to Floyd Mayweather, his legacy will look just like Oscar De La Hoya's. You feel me? That's all I got to say about this one. I'm on to the next one, y'all.